Ben Nelson, Bennelson, Interim Assistant Director, Wichita Public Works and Utilities. This is our going into the New Year's Eve holiday, the New Year's holiday weekend. Just like last year, we have our some winter precipitation forecasted. This being the first storm of the year, we wanted to again give an overview of what our winter storm response entails, and also share some details about when we're going to have our operators activated and when they're going to be treating the roadways. So the forecasts continue to evolve. This isn't expected to begin until the overnight hours, Friday into Saturday. So there's some changes and variation along the way in terms of when the temperatures will make the precipitation turn from rain, which is what starts the event, into some sort of freezing rain or drizzle or sleet in the middle of the event, and then transition fully to snow. The latest forecast as of Thursday morning shows that the Wichita area could receive some ice accumulation and then about 2 inches of snow, according to the National Weather Service at this time. And then the storm looks like it'll wrap up sometime afternoon on Saturday the 1st. What we are doing here at the City of Wichita, we have our full contingent of 60 plow trucks. They have the salt and sand material spreaders that are on the back of the trucks that apply a mixture of material to help melt the snow and ice away, as well as provide traction to drivers. Those trucks are ready to go. Our operators, our first shift operators, have been placed on standby and available to report as of 6 p.m. on Friday. And then we have our second shift operators scheduled to report and begin operations at midnight on Saturday. This obviously could change. We're still a day and a half out from when the storm is expected to hit. So our staff will continue to monitor the weather forecasts. The National Weather Service provides updates every few hours in terms of the precipitation, the type of precipitation, as well as the timing of the precipitation, and we'll alter any sort of activation response accordingly. Now, when we get into these snow and ice events, there's not a lot of variation in terms of what we do. We always deploy the full contingent of all of our equipment that's available, the full 60 trucks that make their way through 1,500 lane miles of the primary north-south streets. And when school is in session, we also apply the salt sand mix and do any plowing necessary to an additional 300 lane miles of secondary routes and school routes that primarily serve schools. Obviously, since this is a weekend and a holiday, that's not going to be a priority for us this time around. But again, not a lot of variation goes into these. Whenever there's one of these events, we put the salt and sand mix down, and if we get enough snow, it's usually more than 2 inches, then we'll put the plows down and plow the snow to the curb. We prefer not to have to plow snow because it significantly slows down the trucks. We can make our way through and provide more material treatment if we don't have to put our plows down. But this is kind of a borderline storm about whether we'll need to do any plowing or not. But that'll be a decision that's made in the field by our operators and the crew shift supervisors. So it'll be a standard response, which is the full contingent, everything we have available. We're starting the season here with quite a bit of salt, way more salt than we're probably going to need. We have a lot of reserves. We have everything actively mixed at our three dispatch locations. So we're fully ready to respond, and we'll adjust any of our plans that we have right now according to weather forecasts that change. And the last thing I would remind people is anybody who's interested in seeing where the plow trucks have been, we have a website, an interactive website that shows where all the plow trucks are and where they've been in the past hour and 24 hours. That can be found at wichita.gov/snow removal. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
And real quick, could you go over just one more time the safe driving?
Yes, I apologize I left that out. We have some normal safe driving tips that we usually offer when these storms hit, and I will say this, usually when something is hitting at midnight on a Saturday or a Sunday, there's generally a little bit less traffic, but obviously that's a different story New Year's Eve to New Year's Day, so there's probably going to be a little more traffic on the streets than we normally see in the overnight hours. So anybody who's out on New Year's Eve, coming home or going wherever after New Year's Eve celebrations, and throughout the day on Saturday, the roads will be slick in certain spots. To pay careful attention to any sort of hills, intersections, curves, overpasses. Those are usually the first ones to ice up, and also the last ones sometimes to melt off. Those can be problem areas. Provide plenty of following distance between them and other vehicles. Provide more space than normal when they're braking, hitting the brakes before going into an intersection, and also make sure that they clear off their windshields, both the front and the back windshields and their side windows, so they have clear view of everybody who's around them. And also, in all these conditions, just to slow down and drive appropriate speeds for the conditions, and everybody will hopefully be able to get to where they need to go in a safe fashion.
Will the rain have any, hindrance on what you guys are going to be doing this weekend?
Yes, the one variation that we sometimes have with these storms is really dictated by rain. We can apply in advance of winter precipitation what we call brine. It's a saline solution. It's about 3 parts water, 1 part salt. That will normally adhere to the roadway, and then when any snow falls on top of it, it melts off the snow. We apply that in advance of storms when it's going to be just straight snow out of the gate. With this one obviously being, we're expected to receive quite a bit of rain, I believe, before. That rain would just wash that brine off the roadway, and so it wouldn't be serving any purpose. So because this event is beginning with rain, we're not going to be applying a brine pretreatment.
Are you guys concerned at all that this extra traffic is going to get in the way of any trucks that are trying to, clear the roads for safety reasons?
We don't have any abnormal concerns about the overnight traffic being a holiday. I will say this, we had the exact same scenario last year. I believe we had something like 6 inches of snow that started right at midnight, so it's a repeat of last year, but a little less snow. It's always a challenge, obviously, working around vehicles. It's usually more of an issue, though, when we're getting snow in the daytime on a weekday or when schools are in session and normal business is occurring. That's usually when we'll have more traffic around our vehicles. And one of the safe driving tips that I failed to mention is that to give plenty of space if people see plows, especially when they're on those north-south roads. They'll see either 2 or even sometimes 3 plows all in a line, to give plenty of space behind those plows. I know it slows people down because our plows drive slowly, but to give them plenty of space to keep themselves safe and also keep the plow drivers safe as well.
Ben, sorry, did you say that you guys are fully staffed right now? Is that staffing issues a problem?
We do not have a staffing issue right now. We need 150 personnel to respond to these storms around the clock, which is what we're going to be doing this time. So about 75 on each shift. We also have beyond the 150, and I don't have the latest number, something around 168 or so who are total operators available to us. But as we all know, people get sick, there's something that goes on, someone's on leave. And so we've got that extra contingency built in for when there's just normal sick leave or whatever's scheduled. And we obviously review vacation schedules to make sure we can always hit the 150. So we're fully staffed for these events right now.
Can you repeat the number of miles that you said will be treated, please?
Yes, we will treat 1,500 lane miles of arterial streets. Those are the primary north-south streets. And when we have storm events that are occurring during a normal work week or school week, we also will treat 300 lane miles of secondary and school routes. Now, some of those secondary routes are streets that are fairly heavily traveled, that serve the arterials. Once we get through the arterials and those are in good shape, we'll probably go do some extra treatment on those. But thankfully, we have some pretty favorable weather forecasted beginning even on Sunday. Sunday, we're supposed to have, I believe it's a sunny day. It's still it's going to not get out of the 30s from what I recall, but the sun does a great deal to melt off all of this stuff. So thankfully, this isn't going to be a long-lived event, we don't think.
Well, based on past experience, do you guys tend to hit certain areas, or are there certain areas that you guys keep a lookout for, or you just stick to particular routes?
So we have a pre-assigned routes, and so we don't deviate from those. The problem areas, though, that we do know about are the hills, overpasses, intersections, curves. Intersections don't necessarily freeze up any more than anything else, but because there's a lot of people applying brakes to those in advance of them, we do try to pay special attention to those, as well as any of the elevated surfaces or curves where people are having to apply brakes, because that becomes a particular problem area for people as well. But other than that, I mean, we stick to our routes, and there isn't any one area or two areas in particular.
How is applying the brakes? How does that cause problems?
Because if people are applying their brakes and they're going a little too fast for conditions, they can skid and lose control of their vehicles. And so we try to drop plenty of material, a few hundred feet in advance of intersections, so that there's a little bit more traction for people as they're driving. And because a lot of times drivers will be driving and there's plenty of traction when they're not applying the brakes, they hit the brakes, all of a sudden they can't control the vehicle anymore. That's where it becomes a problem. Obviously, intersections are where people are applying their brakes probably most often.
Since y'all are pre-treating the treatment that y'all are putting down when this happens after the rain and all of that, there's no concern then because there's no pre-treatment, or is there more caution for people driving?
No, the material, so we basically have the pre-treatment, the brine, and then we have the, I guess I'd call it the active treatment when the storm's going on. That's pelletized versions of salt along with granules of sand. The salt works really well. When it gets really cold, sometimes we supplement it. The salt that we use normally is a sodium chloride. That works really well when it's, the temperatures are fairly close to freezing. When it gets really, really cold, 10 degrees and below, that really kind of doesn't melt nearly as well. We'll sometimes supplement that with a type of salt called calcium chloride that melts more effectively at those lower temperatures. And again, we'll track the forecast on this one because I think it's kind of borderline about it being really pretty cold, so we may supplement this time around as well. So that, since it's pelletized, that really, it does not stick into the roadway and washing off. It obviously washes off somewhat, but we're going through there actively applying more and more throughout the storm. That, plus the fact that when people drive on that salt as well as the sand, it provides some mechanical friction against any snow or ice that are on the roadway, and that serves to break it up as well. First storm of the season. Let's everybody be safe and have a happy new year. Thanks.